Come on, smile. I know you're suffering with a cold, but I don't care. You still smile.
Fuck off.
The people have been gracious enough to come and see you, and therefore you can smile for them. All right.
Away you go, you grumpy old git. Afternoon, people. Welcome aboard. Things will be a wee bit different this afternoon. We have a special guest today.
Yes.
And I'll bring him in and introduce him. So today's special guest is it's James Kelly. And James also has his own YouTube channel, folks, and that's why I wanted to get him on, because there's 3,500 odd subscribers in this channel, and I'd like to see James's channel get subscribers from your channel, because I'd like all the independent channels to be linked one way or another.
What makes James special, right, is that he takes apart all the polls and he actually tells you how they operate and what they should be doing, right? Which I think is great. I mean, the last thing with YouGov, the explanation you gave, that was beautiful. James, my compliments to you, my friend. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
The introduction part. James, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. Nice to meet you.
Right, we all know your name. Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Cumbernauld.
Cumbernauld? You're only across the road then.
Oh, right. Where are you from?
I'm living in Salisbury, just outside Airdrie.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's very close, yeah. I'm from Forsyth originally, but I've lived in Cumbernauld most of my life.
And I'm in Clydebank, and within the blast area of Fast Lane. But anyway, that's another story.
That's all right. We're in the blast area now. Don't worry about it. Just we'll live 4 seconds longer than you.
Yeah, all right.
That's true. Yeah.
Hey, James, how long have you been running the Scott Goes Pop blog?
What would it be now? Almost 18 years, because I started in May 2008. Although I did it was kind of like an experiment, and I stopped after a month, and then I started again properly, kind of like early 2009. But it's been well over a decade and a half at any rate.
Wow.
So what did you call it? Scott Goes Pop for?
Well, the thing was, I was just sort of experimenting with the idea of blogging, and I couldn't really make up my mind what the subject of the blog should be, because I was interested in politics. I was also interested in the Eurovision Song Contest. Well, I still am. I mean, it's a strange combination, but I just thought, maybe just to start with, I would do both. I would do a bit of both, because it was May, it was the spring, so it was Eurovision month. So I thought I'd do a little bit of politics, do a little bit of Eurovision. So I was just trying to think of a title that sort of vaguely sort of covered them both. And that was not the first title, but the other ones were rubbish, absolute rubbish. So I sort of ended up with Scott Goes Pop by default.
Well, you were 18 years younger and all that sort of explains it a wee bit.
Yeah.
James, it's the one thing I've got a nice 1,000-watt cinema sound system in the living room. I never, ever switch it on.
All right.
There's only one occasion when I do switch it on is the Eurovision.
Oh, wow. Fellow fan, yeah.
This time, because of Israel.
Yeah.
Aye. Well, actually, I was going to say that when it comes to the Eurovision Song Contest and politics, politics has played a big part in the Eurovision contest for years now.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why the UK gets 0 points all the time.
The one time the UK used to get all the points. Boom, bang, a bang, and all the rest of it, all these songs that did well, right? But anyway, that's another story. Come on, I digress. We're here to get the Angle Boys lamp out and find out where this guy James Kelly's.
Aye, he's in the interrogation chair. So, James, you're obviously an SNP member. You've been elected onto the policy committee, the National Policy Committee. So how long have you been an SNP member, James?
Well, I was one of the wave that joined after the referendum in 2014. I joined in probably October 2014. I'd been voting for the SNP since I was 18, but I didn't join until then. As you may know, I then made the mistake in 2021 of leaving the SNP and joining Alba, which was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life.
I've quite enjoyed your commentary of it, but James.
Yeah, and
James,
so
James, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It's like we sent the hitmen out after you, but they missed.
No, but
well,
honestly,
I certainly paid the penalty for that mistake because I was put through like months and months of like a Kafkaesque disciplinary process where nobody
Really?
could quite work out what I was actually being accused of. It was really bizarre. But anyway, thankfully that's now over.
I think the Alba party's now over.
Do you feel now that being back within the SNP it's any better for you, or do you still feel a bit jaded, but disjointed?
Well, I think it's got to. I mean, I think by 2021 it got to the situation where no matter which party I was in, I was never going to agree with 100% of everything. You know, no matter which party I was in, because if I was in Alba, I was going to be on the sort of the moderate wing, and if I was in the SNP, I was going to be on the sort of the more radical wing. So that's always going to be the case. However, I think since I've been back in the SNP, you know, comparing sort of like branch meetings to what I used to experience in Alba, there's no comparison. It's just Alba was just a shambles, absolute shambles. I don't think I realized quite how bad it was until I got out of it.
You're gonna miss out on Tommy. I'm telling you, you're gonna miss out on Tommy.
Aye, wonderful stuff. So you had your short spell with the Alba party and then back into the SNP. Now, how long have you been doing the YouTube channel?
You know, I was checking actually, and technically, I started the YouTube channel before I started the blog because the YouTube channel, the first video I posted, which was just as a like holiday video of my holiday in Brittany from, I think it was September 2007. So it sort of predates the blog by about 7 months. But obviously, I hardly ever used it. I think I started. And during the 2019 general election, again, I sort of as an experiment, I did some election videos. And then I kind of found it was awfully time consuming compared to blogging. It was awfully time consuming. And I couldn't get the camera to work properly. I'd bought a camera and I couldn't get it to quite work properly. And I just drifted away from it again. But I did use it occasionally for, because when I used to commission polls myself between 2020 and 2023, I commissioned several opinion polls. And so I used to use the YouTube channel to kind of do little teasers for this evening's question in the poll, that kind of thing. And then like last July or June, I think it was, I decided to try it more sort of, more on a sort of more permanent basis. So I started doing videos instead of the blog posts.
Now, one of the blogs that I read this morning was referenced the way you talked about the Alba party and how you like the idea that we were going after the list, right, rather than the constituency vote. They left that to the SNP, right? But things changed, and you were quite shocked by it. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So I mean, when Alba was set up, if you look at the press conference that Alex Salmon did on the day that Alba was established, he was explicit that it was a list-only party, and I think it was reasonable to assume that meant. I mean, I suppose maybe there was a point of ambiguity over whether they would stand in first-past-the-post constituencies at Westminster elections. That was never maybe clearly explained, but certainly in the Holyrood context, he was making pretty clear that. There was going to be a list only, and then that all sort of changed. I mean, they seem to have gone back to that now, which is very welcome. But Alba started off as the way it was presented was that it would be a kind of complement to the SNP, and it wasn't trying in any way to run against the SNP. It would just be trying to sort of, as a sort of complement to them, try and win list seats and cooperate with the SNP in the Scottish Parliament. Whereas very quickly it sort of descended into a kind of revenge vehicle against the SNP, and it was about how can we damage the SNP. And I would sit in meetings where the hatred and bitterness towards Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP was just extraordinary, and it seemed to me the real purpose of the Alba party. Maybe it always was from the start, and what we were seeing to begin with was just kind of window dressing. I don't know, but it didn't. By 2021 or whatever, by 2022, I should say, it didn't resemble the way it had been presented at the launch.
Yeah, it's rather interesting. It's interesting hearing this because obviously you experienced the party from the inside,
And of course,
rather than we would look at the party from the outside and go, right, okay, fine, fair enough. We realise that a few of them are very, very anti-SNP, and that's it, end of story, right? But I think the wonderful thing is where you have a go at the Rev Stuart Campbell over what he does, and he's trying to destroy the SNP by getting people to vote for reform. Can you tell us a little bit about that one, please?
Well, I mean, he won't admit. This is the thing. I mean, he's obviously become a Reform UK supporter. I mean, it's absolutely obvious that's happened, but he will not directly admit that because he knows that would be too big a risk in terms of.
You actually, in one exchange, you actually asked him outright. You said to him, "Are you going to knock out the idea of reform? Are you going to push it away, or what?" And he came back with, "Or what?" Yes.
Yeah, he just said, I can't possibly predict what the circumstances would be. So how can I possibly know whether I would be voting for a far right anti-independence party? It's a ridiculous question to ask me when there's still a few months to go. I mean, how can I possibly know what would be in my mind at that point?
All I can say is wrong answer. Yeah. Anyway. Go on. Do the voice.
No, I don't do the voice. Save it for
later. Do the voice. Go on. Do the voice. Go on.
Stu. Anyway, save that for later.
Right, guys, if you've got any questions that you want to put to Mr. Kelly, please put them up now if you wouldn't mind. And what I'll do is, while David's getting a hold of the angle poise lamp, I'll keep an eye on what's coming in.
Right. Well, you keep an eye on the Hi Daily Buzz. Nice to see you in there. Never said hello to people as we normally say hello, but very exciting to have you on, James. Really, I was quite excited to get you on because I love the polls and the polling data myself, and I'm too stupid to do the breakdown the way you do. So I'm well chuffed.
No, but the thing is, so James has got an ability to actually see through and beyond the polls, which is it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what he comes up with. It really is. I greatly respect it. I really do, James.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it would appear that Desiree agrees with you on the Kezia Dugdale situation when it came to Stu Campbell. Desiree's got Campbell was useful in the pre-2014 referendum restarts, but after Kezia episode, he went nuts.
Yeah, I think some people have the theory, which may well be true, that he was so upset that he didn't get backing from the SNP for his action against Kezia Dugdale that's maybe the cause of some of his bitterness towards the SNP now.
Well, where we had this story before, James, does Craig Murray come to mind at all? Craig Murray tried to get into the SNP as
oh yeah.
They knocked him back, and straight away Craig was he was huffing and puffing. Eventually, he went to Alba. And story.
Right, we've got a couple of your questions for James.
I do like Craig. Let me make that point. I do. I've talked to Craig a number of times. I know I hear what you say, but I do think he's a decent bloke.
I go on all right with me all.
Julie Brown asked the question of SNP 1 and 2 or 1 and any indie party.
Is that for me? Well, certainly what I will be doing is SNP both votes. This is such a difficult issue because there's so much sort of misinformation about the electoral system floating around, and people have a very fixed idea of how it works. And there's this idea that the SNP cannot win any list seats. That there's almost like a kind of iron law that they can't win any list seats, and that there's not really that kind of uncertainty about it. Whereas in fact there is a considerable amount of uncertainty. And in fact, if for example, hypothetically, if any party, including the SNP, got 100% of the list vote, you might ask people how many seats on the list do you think they would get, and maybe based on the propaganda, they would say only a handful. Whereas in fact, if you get 100% of the list vote, you get 100% of list seats. So the potential for the SNP to win list seats is theoretically as high as the number of list seats there are available. It's obviously quite a complicated calculation because it depends on how many constituency seats the SNP win, interrelated to how many votes they get on the list in each given region. But they certainly can win list seats, and you don't know how many constituency seats they will take in each region until after your vote is cast.
Aye.
And that's the whole point. And yeah, the first past the post element of the electoral system is much more sensitive to small swings, so you can, hypothetically, a few percentage points here or there could make all the difference between winning, say, 8 constituency seats in a region and maybe winning only 2 or 3. And if it goes on the lower end of that scale, you're going to need the list seats at that point. And you don't know which is going to happen until after you cast your vote. And that's the problem.
Right. Now, James, viewer question for you. Which opinion polls are the most reliable in your point of view?
I always say that Ipsos are the gold standard pollster in the UK at the moment. They've certainly got the longest sort of pedigree. People used to say that ICM with the gold standard pollster in the UK, but ICM are no longer operating, or certainly not operating in the political sphere anyway. So that leaves Ipsos as the pollster with the sort of best pedigree. I mean, of course, they are one of the more yes-friendly polling companies, so it would be nice if they were the most accurate. It's impossible to be 100% sure which polling company is the most accurate because we're not having independence referendums every year, and so you can't sort of check to see that level of accuracy. But I mean, Ipsos are very sensible in one respect, which is that they do not weight their results by the recalled vote from the 2014 referendum, which was 12 years ago. Even for a recalled vote from, say, 6 years ago, there would be a danger of false recall. But by this point, it is getting ridiculous. You cannot expect people to remember accurately what they did 12 years ago. And that is, if people are remembering wrongly, then that is going to have a massive skew effect on the results.
The other thing is, of course, a lot of that demographic for 12 years ago will no longer be here.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's a lesser problem because they take account of that. They're not sort of... they're taking account of the fact that normal demographic changes of people dying or people reaching voting age. They take account of that. It's more the question of whether the people they're assuming did vote in the 2014 referendum, if they're getting the results of that, if people are saying they voted yes when they in fact voted no. And that's the suspicion of what's probably happening, because people probably in retrospect wish they had voted yes, and they might well convince themselves that they did vote yes.
I know a few actually.
Yeah.
I know a few people who would actually say, I voted yes, Davy, when I know fine well they voted no.
Yeah.
Right.
Another viewer question. David.
Carry on. That's right.
Another viewer question. You asked the viewers to pick questions.
So I'm reading it. That's all I'm doing.
Okay, on you go.
James, will Reform successfully split the Union vote in favour of the SNP? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I mean, it would certainly be very helpful if the unionist vote is very evenly split in the constituency ballot. That's the key to getting a really good result. And I was thinking about, because obviously over the last sort of 24, 48 hours, we're now into a slightly new situation where it's become much more plausible that Keir Starmer will cease to be Prime Minister before the Holyrood election rather than after. People had thought the danger to him would come just after the Holyrood election. And I had previously thought that, if Keir Starmer were to fall a bit early, that would be bad for us because, it might lead to a Labour resurgence under a slightly more popular new leader. But I'm now thinking, actually, Reform have got a little bit ahead of Labour, we think. And so in a strange way, it might almost be helpful if there was a little bit of a Labour recovery, and then you might get a little bit more of an even split between Labour and Reform. And if it was exactly evenly split, you might get a really good result for the SNP in the constituencies, depending, of course, on unionist tactical voting, how extensive that is, which is the unknown quantity.
I've got another couple of questions for you, James, from the audience. This one is from Maury. Hey, what do you think what do you think of the new party alliance to liberate Scotland?
Okay, so, I mean, from what I can gather, I mean, I don't speak to them so much now, but I used to speak quite a bit to former senior Alba members who had left Alba for one reason or another, and some of them were sort of maybe flirting with Liberate Scotland or had links to them. And the strong impression I got was that certainly at that point, which was like a few months ago now, that Barhead boy Roddy is his name, Roddy McLeod, I think. Yeah, I was on the Alba NEC with him, but I always think of him as Barhead boy. He seemed to be like the kind of the autocrat, with like the kind of the Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh equivalent in Liberate Scotland. He was sort of calling all the shots, and he was doing it in a very autocratic way. And well, that's unhealthy for one thing. I think if people were sort of moving away from Alba because Alba was too autocratic, which it certainly was, you don't want to go into this sort of carbon copy situation just with a new autocrat who is actually, with all due respect to Barhead boy, who is a good blogger, he's a talented blogger, but he's not a talented, charismatic politician. And so you're just sort of, you're getting almost like a sort of bog standard version of what you had in Alba with the autocratic politicians there who at least had some sort of charisma. So that's one problem. There's the autocratic nature of this organization, which seems to be under one man's control. The other problem is, the bigger problem is the involvement of the party's sovereignty, which is I mean, I've read their manifesto for the 2024 general election, and I mean, it's kind of encoded language, so you have to sort of decode it a bit. But to my reading, they are essentially a far-right party. They're certainly a nativist party. They want to eliminate all economic immigration, which is an extreme position. That is a really extreme position. Wow. to eliminate all economic immigration. It sounds very much like they want a kind of ethnically based citizenship, maybe based on bloodline, which is really sort of dodgy territory. I cannot understand why somebody like Eva Comrie, who is someone who was one of the really good people in Alba, I can't understand why she's allowed herself to get embroiled in this, because that's an alliance with basically a far right party. I can see why Barhead boy, who is maybe not the most, I can see how he would be sort of susceptible to that danger of getting into that kind of alliance. But the more sensible people, I don't know what they're doing.
No, I'm a bit surprised to hear that Eva's getting involved in that, actually. Known Eva for a very long time. As for Barhead boy, I think he flipped his lid in 2014 after the loss as well. I really do. I mean, there's a lot of good bloggers and vloggers out there. Barhead boy's got he's got the vlog now, hasn't he? What's it called? Sorry, the podcast. The podcast, through the prison or something like that. I can't listen to the guy. Just can't. Wee bit too far out there for me. Now, here's a bog standard question we get all the time, Stuart, and we may as well let you pat this one away for us this time, or deal with it however you feel fit. And this one's for Peter. And he says, should SNP go for a plebiscite this election?
Well, I mean, yeah, I would have supported that. I mean, I think obviously it's now February and the election's in May. So even if in a sort of fantasy universe we could persuade John Swinney to do that, it's awfully late to be starting that. But yeah, I mean, if you could go back in time a year, I would have said, yeah, this should be a plebiscite election. I mean, my bigger concern is the fact that they're saying that, for a mandate for an independence referendum, you need a single party SNP overall majority. I mean, that would be fine if we had a first past the post voting system, but we have, whether we like it or not, we have a system which, I would say probably the chances of a single party overall majority, not because the SNP are in any way unpopular, but simply because of the electoral system itself, the chances of the SNP winning an overall majority on a single party basis is less than 1%, realistically. Maybe 1 in 200, something like that. And so it's just setting a target that we're going to probably fail. I mean, I'm not saying it's totally impossible, but it's just we're sort of voluntarily putting the target out of reach, and that's the part of that I don't understand.
That does generate a question for me, James. Is that at the moment in the polls, we're seeing that the SNP I've got projected 64 seats. 65 would give them the majority they require, right? Do you think there's any truth in that? Any credence in it?
No, I mean, when we see these projections of the SNP supposedly on 64 or 65 seats on the basis of the current opinion polls, those projections, as far as I'm aware, are normally coming from the Twitter account called Stats for Lefties, which is a good account. It's a very useful resource. But for some reason, he seems to be consistently. Sorry, I called the person he. My apologies. I think he's non-binary or something. He is not non-binary. They are non-binary. My apologies. But they are putting the SNP projection too high. Realistically, when they are putting that figure as 64, usually the more sort of conservative projections would be more like 59 or 60. I think that's realistically where the SNP are heading at the moment.
Yes, I think that's more realistic, And a follow-up question that I knew was coming for Peter, so we may as well let you have it. If by an absolute fluke SNP get a majority and Westminster say no to a referendum, what's next, James?
Well, according to John Swinney, he knows exactly what he's going to do, but he isn't telling anyone. So maybe there is some sort of brilliant option. I think they were hinting at a judicial review. I can't really imagine that would have much of it. I mean, I've always thought that, the argument that people make against a plebiscite election, I know this is a slightly different question, but the argument people make against a plebiscite election is, what do you do afterwards if Westminster just ignore the result? Well, actually, there's plenty you can do afterwards.
Yes.
Particularly if you get a good result in the next Westminster general election, because then you've got options such as parliamentary disruption, or you could, at the extreme example, you could pull the MPs away for maybe a set period or indefinitely. And that creates a democratic deficit, which is hard to neglect. However much the Westminster government may want to do this macho, muscular unionism stuff, it is hard to just ignore the fact if Scotland is going unrepresented in the supposedly national parliament over a prolonged period, that would create a sort of a constitutional crisis over a period of time. So we do have levers. It's just, I think people are a little bit squeamish about not wanting to get into that situation and they would actually prefer to think that there's nothing we could do in that situation, whereas actually there probably is plenty we could do.
Well, from my point of view, if the SNP get a majority and it's a pro-independence parliament again, and they say no, then Westminster 2019 is a plebiscite election as far as I'm concerned. The MPs took us in, the MPs will bring us back out again.
Yeah, and there is an argument actually that the Westminster, I mean, I've changed my mind a little bit on this. There's an argument that maybe a Westminster election is the better arena for a plebiscite election, because it means you can really go in on the single issue of independence, which you can't really do in a devolved election, because it looks like you're being irresponsible and you're neglecting other policy areas. Yeah. But in a Westminster election, you can do that. And so maybe that would be the arena to do it in.
There's also a mechanism to do it, James. Via a Westminster election, there is a mechanism to do it.
I
don't know if you're aware of the mechanism.
Okay.
There's something called the Scottish Grand Committee. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the procedures are in terms of getting that to actually hold a meeting, though. I don't know off the top of my head. It may have been decades since the Scottish Grand Committee last actually met. I don't know.
Stopped officially meeting after devolution.
Right.
It did meet a couple of years ago. As you know, the Scottish Grand Committee is there for when the Scottish MPs and the English ones don't agree, or if there's a law needing passed in Scotland, but nothing to do with England, then in the past the Scottish Grand Committee would bypass Westminster and go straight to the Crown with it. So the Grand Committee system would allow them to hold a vote on whether to stay in the union or no within the MPs as well, and then just withdraw the MPs and that be an end to it.
Yeah, my misgivings on that are that as the MPs in Westminster...
Lights on, please.
Sorry?
Is your lights on?
Yes.
Well, you're sitting in the dark, mate.
Right, okay. Right. Can I get the question out, right?
Aye.
As the MPs are actually earning quite a decent wage now, if they were to walk across the Rainbow Bridge back to Scotland, what would they be facing? No money from Westminster, or a pension of some kind, or
Well,
what?
there's no precedence for it. Sinn Féin get paid and they don't sit.
Right? Okay, fine. Can I see the wage slips? I don't know that. I'm taking your word for it. I'm taking the word of.
I don't know whether they take it or not, David, because they don't take the oath, so I don't know whether.
Yeah, it's, at the end of the day, it's like you look at these things and you go, right, that's all well and good, but we're talking about somebody that's on maybe 80 grand. What's the MP's wage now? What's the MP's wage, guys? Come on.
£92,000.
Right, so there you go.
Tuppence halfpenny. I spend more in beer. Who's on the Grand Committee or the MPs?
Right.
Yeah, buttons. I wouldn't take their job on for that little money.
Anyway, James.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should clarify it. The Scottish Grand Committee is made up of all Scottish MPs and nobody else, and so it is in that sense, it's like a mini Scottish Assembly, elected purely by the Scottish people by first past the post. That's effectively what it is. It just doesn't have any power. Yeah.
Yeah, allow people to understand that when the Union was created, the Scottish Grand Committee and the English Grand Committee were created to deal with the two different legal systems. Because we had two different legal systems, and both are protected in the Treaty of Union, or the trade treaty that is the Treaty of Union. So, but the Grand Committee system would be the way, after you've run a single issue, to actually get the majority of Scottish MPs to say this game's a bogey. If you've only one Tory, one Lib Dem, and one Labour, and maybe and maybe one Reform, and the rest are SNP, well, there isn't any argument. Once that Grand Committee makes its vote and goes straight to the King, the game's a bogey.
Yeah. I'm just like Kirsty Alba is saying, Mr. Milligan's protesting GB Energy by no putting his lights on. Sorry, guys.
Another viewer question. Hold on. Somebody's on catch up. Withdrawing from Westminster have to be in the manifesto? Of course it would be. Aye. That's the whole point of running on a single issue. As James has pointed out, there would be only one issue.
Yeah, you also have to remember, if they run a single issue election, they cannot bring in any other factor or facet at that time. So you can imagine the cuckoos in the nest, as we call them, the unionist parties, would all go, well, what are you not talking about the cost of living for? What are you not talking about this for? What are you not talking about that for? Why is it all about independence? Why is it all about this? If you hope for us that Scotland becomes independent.
Well, I think you should bring those other subjects up in the context of independence. You could say how independence would address these problems.
You have to be careful because it has to be a single issue election. Absolutely. The moment you bring in any other item, then it ceases to be a single issue election. Of course it does.
Aye. Hello, Kevin. Good afternoon, Kevin. Hope you're enjoying the show. Aye, that's the Independence Live's editor. Or
Kevin, I'll have the camera set up taking a picture of you, James.
Aye. Kevin's popped in to say hello, James.
Hi, Kevin.
Have you met Kevin? Aye.
Well, online. Yeah, I met him online.
He's a nice guy in real life and all.
Good guy.
But don't tell him I tell you that, all right?
Absolutely. No, we hate Kevin. We really do.
Andrew, you're asking if the Grand Committee still has cuckoos in the nest. Aye. That's the whole point of having running on a single issue if you're going to make the Westminster election a plebiscite.
Right. If there's
the cuckoos on the nest, can't argue about it when you win because you ran on that manifesto.
There is. It's arithmetic. There are 57 Scottish MPs. right, of whatever flavour. We're hoping that all 57 of those would be SNP, which would be rather simple. But it could be that you've got 50 or SNP at that time. We don't know, right? There might be a couple of Lib Dems. There might be whatever, you know. So at the end of the day, it's like you've still got to have cuckoo's nest. Of course,
Right,
you are.
you're going to have majority rules, and that's democracy.
That's right.
That's Westminster's democracy for you.
Yeah.
And I say, I think it's a simpler route because MPs took us in. MPs should take us back out again.
Yeah.
Now, folks, questions for James. Now, James, what's your other interests outside polling and politics?
Oh, my mind's gone completely blank. What do I do? Well, I go for walks. What do I do? Well, I'll listen to music like everybody does.
So, in other words, it's just polling and politics.
That's a bit harsh. My mind's gone blank. If you give me 10 minutes to think about it, I'll come up with some brilliant.
Sorry, break in here, but Doug Copp is saying, remember, Westminster will continue to cut Scotland's budget.
Aye, they will. But that's right, folks. Come on, more polling questions. So, James, let's go on to the independence polls. They don't seem to be shifting very much. Can you give us a bit of insight into that?
I think they have shifted. I mean, there was quite a significant shift over the last 18 months or so. 2025 was the first calendar year since 2020 and only the second calendar year in history, really, where there was a yes majority. And that came about because, mainly because Norstat, the company that used to be called Panelbase, they moved from being quite a no-friendly company to being repeatedly showing a yes majority last year. I think they first showed a yes majority like in late 2024, something like that, and then consistently last year they kept doing that. And on one or two polls, it was quite a big yes majority, and that has been the main factor in pushing yes into the lead on a sort of average basis across the polling industry. Even YouGov, which is the more sort of at the more no-friendly end of the scale, the yes vote in YouGov polls has crept up a little bit. And it's, no is still in the lead, but it's a much closer battle than it was in previous YouGov polls, maybe a couple of years ago. So this idea that the polls are stuck, which our friend Stu would like us all to believe, isn't entirely true. It certainly hasn't been true for the last 18 months.
Right.
No. Do you feel, James, that polling companies, rather than measuring a trend, they create a trend? So therefore, we have a situation where certain polling companies would lie about what they are. They don't mind being the outlier every now and then.
Well, we know that during the 2014 referendum, I mean, in those days, the president of YouGov was Peter Kellner, and he was open about the fact that he had devised this really convoluted methodology that converted a more modest no lead into a really huge no lead. And the reason he was doing that was because he simply didn't believe the results he was seeing. Now, I don't think he and other people of that mindset are deliberately setting out to mislead people. It's just that if you're a sort of an establishment figure in London or wherever it is Peter Kellner lives or comes from, you're going to have a different approach to this than somebody who is actually rooted in the country that is actually being polled. And I think there's a lot of assumptions and prejudices that come into play, and they may not realize that they have those prejudices. I mean, when I was commissioning polls myself, I had an extremely frustrating conversation with a leading figure in the sort of the London-based, I presume it was London-based sort of polling scene, and over an exact question wording, and it was just so frustrating because he honestly thought he was being totally neutral, and I was the one that was asking for the unreasonable. But you could see the prejudices that were leading him to think that what he was saying was reasonable, and it was just so frustrating. It was like a barrier I just couldn't push through.
So, in other words, what you're saying is he didn't understand what a biased question was.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, James, I've got another viewer's question for you, but I could have maybe knew this one was coming from Peter, but Peter wants to know if you've read Professor Robert Black's a report or findings on the Acts and Treaty of Union.
I haven't read it entirely. I mean, I've got a sort of general sense of what he said. I think I did read part of what he said.
I've got no idea what he said.
So I mean, my view is sort of like somewhere in the middle. I think it's like, yeah, I think the idea is that I'm probably getting this completely wrong, but my impression of what is being said is that the sense of Scotland and England forming a political union is essentially a con or is a mirage, and it was actually annexation. And I think Professor Robert Black was putting the case for this was a de facto annexation of Scotland by the English state. And I mean, I'm not obviously, I don't have anything like the expertise of Robert Black, but my impression is that in some respects that's true, because, you know, obviously you have a supposedly merged parliament, but it just continues with all the procedures of the English parliament. You have a supposedly merged state, but foreign treaties that England entered into before 1707 somehow remain in force, such as the alliance with Portugal, whereas any foreign alliances or foreign treaties that Scotland entered into were just defunct at the point of the union. So that does resemble more like an annexation. But in other respects, you know, there are elements of a sort of genuine union. The fact that the legal system has survived to some extent, the fact that the education system is so distinct. I wouldn't completely rubbish the idea of it being a union. I think it's I think what we have in effect is like a kind of hybrid between a union situation and an annexation situation. Sometimes the answer isn't completely neat and clear cut. I think it is somewhere between the two, in my view.
So therefore, what you're saying is you think that the idea that Scotland sent down, if I remember correctly, about 40 MPs down to London was entirely fair?
Oh, God, and I think that was, I mean, as I understand it, that was below our population share. So that was no, of course that was fair.
It was two equal countries.
Of course, no. Of course,
sometimes England won, sometimes Scotland won. So it was that an even Steven setup.
No, I'm not really sort of talking about whether there was a sort of fair balance of power between Scotland and England. I'm talking more about whether the constitutional setup resembles annexation or union. And in my view,
that question was put to bed in the 1950s or 60s, when the states had to declare to the United Nations whether they considered themselves to be a country or a state. The UK declared itself as a union, a state made up of countries. So that puts that to bed, the annexation idea. Yeah. Just puts it right to bed, because it was declared to the United Nations that this was a union of equals, a voluntary union, sorry. And the UK was a state and not a country. And they've been using that propaganda of the country, when they mean the state, for years in order to confuse people. So, for example, you've got a Westminster politician talking about the country. In Westminster, he's talking about the state. Whereas you got a Scottish politician in Holyrood talking about the country, he's talking about Scotland.
Or you can have that same politician in Westminster talking about the country and he's talking about England. Or Britain equals England. Yeah, so.
Well, as I say, that one about whether we were annexed or not was put to bed when all the different states and countries declared to the United Nations what they were.
As far as I'm concerned on that one, right, is we are not colonised. We are talking ourselves into that nonsense, seriously, by allowing people to yak away about it was, we were annexed at that time, right? That's low nonsense. That's low nonsense. Unless we take it as being an equal union, and therefore it is a treaty, that treaty can be torn up. Unless you're into that.
Wait a minute, I'll be a wee second here. Rubbish, Davey, it was clearly annexation. I never said it was annexation. I never said it wasn't annexation. I'm saying the UK state declared it wasn't annexation.
But it wasn't annexation. As far as I'm concerned.
But it's funny how people can misunderstand what you're saying quite easily, David. I never said there wasn't annexation. I just said that the UK state declared it wasn't.
Yeah. Well,
so you don't want to use things. You don't want to use things taken out of context. There's some people think we're a colony and we're being annexed. There's other people think we're a country and we're just underplaying our hand.
Yeah.
You know,
we cannot allow ourselves to fall into this thing of where Scotland was annexed. Scotland's never been annexed. The people in the powers in England at the time didn't want to chance Scotland rising itself up again and taking them out. Seriously, that's what it came down to. Again,
money actually. England was fighting a war on both fronts. Scotland had money in it, had fucking none.
That's right.
But that's beside the point. Whether it's annexation or no, it's what the state says.
Yeah.
And it says we're a union. And it's supposed to be voluntary.
Yep. And it's a treaty. And a treaty can be torn up. Simple as that. So, bite my banger. Who says that? Anyway, there you go.
Oh, the tattoo guy.
The tattoo guy. He's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
But no, I don't want to get into this whole debate about colony or no. I really don't.
He's not as good as James, though. James is brilliant. James is superb.
So, what's your opinion, James? Colony or not?
Well, as I was sort of saying there, I think it's sort of somewhere in between the two. I think Robert Black's arguments, some of them do stack up. The thing about the foreign treaties that remained in force, that were settled by the English state before 1707, whereas the treaties that were entered into by Scotland before 1707 were revoked. So that looks more like annexation than it does like a union. Whereas there are other features of the unions that look more genuine to me. So I think the answer is somewhere in between the two.
Now, apparently we missed a question, James. Could James Kelly answer Hasbury Stumble's question about polling seemingly ignores 2 votes in Scotland?
I don't think it does, because all polls, well, a very small number of polls don't do this, but the vast majority of polls ask for voting intentions from the constituency ballot and the list ballot, and sometimes often those results are very different from each other. So most polls do take that into account.
I have to agree. Most of the polls I've seen on Scottish elections, did they cover the list and the constituencies? So obviously,
if a polling company asks the question of who will you be voting for, sir or madam, right, or whoever, right, and you go SNP, and the second question's got to be, is that with your first vote or is that with your second vote? And that's where the division comes when the data comes in from. Yeah.
No, what they would do is they would say, right, the question sequence would be, for the Scottish Parliament election in May, you have 2 votes. The first vote is for a constituency representative. Who do you intend to vote for with your constituency vote? And then you'll get the answer to that. And then they'll ask a separate question, which is, and the second vote is for a list of candidates to represent you on a regional basis on a proportional representation system. How would you vote with that regional list vote? So you get 2 separate questions.
Yeah, without ramming my fist down somebody's throat, anybody's throat, right? My feeling on the second vote, a lot of people would say, what you should do is vote for another independence backing party with that, Greens or whoever, right? Okay. But the way I look at it is that not a single vote has been cast yet. So therefore, SNP, who's by choice, could end up whereby in one of the areas that they don't win. Right? And that second vote then becomes by insurance policy.
Yeah, exactly.
So if they don't win that, they're in with a chance of getting at least a list seat in that particular area. Yeah? And
I agree with that. And the other point I would make is that I think tactical voting on the list is a bad idea, because the system is set up really so that the list vote is the more important vote. It's the vote that determines the overall composition of Parliament, because the proportional element is based on the regional list vote alone. The constituency voting patterns does not determine the proportionality of the system. The proportionality is based purely on how people vote on the list. So if you want your vote to be properly counted, it would have to be a list vote. However, if people are ignoring that advice, that the list vote is the more important vote that you should use as your first preference vote, effectively, you should vote for your first choice party on the list. If people do ignore that advice, which I think is foolish, then the second thing they should consider is that if they do vote tactically on the list, they have to vote realistically for a party that can win seats. And the only other pro-independence party, apart from the SNP, that have any chance, realistically, of winning seats is the Green Party. So if people are being foolish enough to vote tactically, at least bear in mind that only the Greens can deliver the goods in that respect.
Right, well, one question for you, James.
Yep, sorry.
What do you think about votes being held overnight before counting the next day?
Yeah, it was really interesting. There was a 2024 general election. There was an interview done with Professor John Curtis who addressed this point, which a lot of people would say is a sort of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, the idea that there's some sort of problem with votes being held for any period of time. And he was saying, yeah, the vast majority of countries just count the votes in the polling station immediately, and you get district level results. And on here, we just pretend, oh, it's fine to just, to move the votes around to a central station or to hang on to them for a few hours or whatever.
That's always worried me because, I mean, there's no reason why. You've got an electoral officer in the polling station. You've got representatives for each of the political parties normally at the polling station. 10 o'clock, open the doors, witness the count being done by the staff that's there, and watch it being phoned in.
Yeah.
Instead, what we get is over the hills and far away.
I should stress that I don't really think there's any sort of large scale fraud going on. But the point is that you should eliminate the chance of that happening if you can.
But James, that then leads you to the thinking that whoever puts the idea together of how things run knows that those polling boxes or the ballot boxes going over the hills and far away is a good idea because that allows them to be fiddled with.
Well, possibly. I think John Curtis was arguing that maybe this is just a kind of relic of how things were done in the 19th century, and we just carried on doing them that way because out of habit. There's not necessarily any malice involved, but I just think that if the system is open to abuse, then you should kind of close those dangers of abuse.
What you're saying is nowadays they do it, but they just don't use the word stand and deliver anymore. Is that what it is?
Okay. All right.
Well, but as I say, it doesn't make any sense the fact that we move the ballot boxes in order to do a count. The counts would be quicker because the individual stations like mine, especially the smaller ones, there's only about 1,200 voters here. It could be done in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And phoned into a central location or sent by computer across the central scheme. So I think this moving of ballot boxes is just unnecessary. And it does leave the system looking as if it's open to abuse. Even if it's not happening, it does make it look as if it could be open to abuse. So the idea of counting in the polling station where you vote is the right idea for me as far as I'm concerned.
Well, was it the Russian leader that said it's unimportant of what you vote? The most important thing is who counts the votes.
Everybody's been that remark's been attributed to almost everybody, David.
Well,
to be fair enough, because it is. If you're going to pockle a vote, then it is the important thing. The important person when you're going to pockle a vote is who's doing the coup.
Yeah, I mean the Americans dabbled with the electronic polling machines, and it was found that they can be got round. And when they were asked, can anybody get round this? And there's a $10,000 reward or whatever if you can get round it, right? And the guy came up with it. He said, "There you go." He punched in numbers and away it went. And it did exactly what he said it was going to do. So,
as I say, it's quite controversial. I don't think that the ballot boxes need to be moved from the voting station, the polling station, to be counted. I don't. I think it'd be very simple when you close it at 10 to get party representatives, because there is always party representatives there, and the people who work for the Coon or for the election in that polling station to do the Coon witness.
I think at the moment we've got a situation whereby we're going to have an awful lot more power in our hands in these things, right? And I would like to think that at some time in the not too distant future that could be the way we will do polling in the future. At the moment, it's wide open. At the moment, it's dangerous. If that becomes a situation at the moment whereby people vote with their phones, it's too open to, it's insecure. But is it insecure? Any more insecure than our ballot boxes going over the hills and far away? I don't know.
Right. What a fast hour this has been. James, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to come on, because it is. I find your stuff you do is fascinating. David finds the stuff you're doing fascinating, and we'd like our viewers, of which there are 154 at the moment, to also subscribe to your YouTube channel and get involved in listening to the data you're putting out, because I think it's important for us all, because it helps us plan when it comes to campaigning this information. And when it comes to mainstream, none of us trust the mainstream at all anymore. None of us. Absolutely none of us. So it's good to have an independent voice doing the analysis.
James, it would also be very, very nice that over the next so many weeks, you put out what you think is the actual position of number of seats projected. Yeah, doing the whole thing of put the polar polls. I think you've done that in the past. You did polar polls, didn't you?
Yeah, I have done in the past. Yeah, it's always difficult to work out exactly how to average them, because it's difficult to work out how to give the right sort of weighting to each polling company. But yeah.
Well, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see a James Kelly weighting system.
Mr. E says if a system works, don't meddle with it.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make there is it would be nice for to actually see what the real projection is for the SNP, because at the end of the day, people could be sitting back in the laurels and going, well, we're getting 64 seats, getting an extra seat, that's it, just a wee bit of extra effort, and that's it. And what you said, if it's sub 58, 59 seats, that's frightening.
Thanks, Laurie. James, I don't know if you know this, but all the money that we make off this channel, we put to food banks. We don't get a penny out of it. Just when you see the super chats, I'm so you just know that it's no coming to us. It goes out to food banks each month. Now, James, I'm working in about an hour. The show's only an hour long. So I want to thank you. I really do, because I've been keen to get you on. You've seen me drop a few messages, and it was hard to get in contact with you to start with, but I'm glad we've managed to hook up. And maybe a wee bit later as we get closer to the election and some of the polling data is starting to tumble through the system, do you mind if I give you a wee call to come back and use a breakdown?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for inviting me on.
No, listen, it's and while you're here, and just before we wind this up and I'll let you go, folks, subscribe to James's YouTube channel. What's the name of the channel, James?
It's my name. So that makes it hard to find, because my name is so common, but it's James Kelly.
Right. Maybe you want to retitle it Scott Goes Pop. So, folks, get out there, subscribe to his channel, get his subscription up, and thanks, James. I really do appreciate it. And folks, I'm afraid it's time to wind it up. So, James, I'm going to stick you back in the green room. I'll speak to you again in a wee second. Well, David and I wind this one up.
Well, I thought that was excellent. That was really good.
Brilliant, actually.
James acquitted himself very nicely indeed. He is a gentleman who's gone to Alba and eventually has kicked that in the touch and has come back to SNP. And I think that in itself is, let's just say, some of that is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah. I'm not going to. We'll just get to the point here, David, because it's just after 5. James is still in the green room. We're going to get Siturio and things like that. So, folks, thanks for your kind contribution to Food Banks today. Moderators or spanners, thanks for spannering. And right,
thanks for your questions.
Eyes on the prize. Go on with you.
Time for independence, 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 as it always is in Scotland.
Right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow morning. I apologise about this morning, but I'm afraid I was called into work. One of these things. I've still got to earn a crust. Have a nice day, and I'm going to work again this evening, so bye for now.